Right, this is part 2 of my custom office build. Last time we cleared the office out and we got the cabinets built and installed in place. Now we can work on the bench tops. I need to cut these to the size that I want, so I'm setting them up on a couple of sawhorses in my garage. My first cut is to decrease the width of each bench top, and I need to be able to cut a nice straight edge. Since I don't have a track saw, I'm going to use the second bench top as a guide for my circular saw. I spent a good bit of time making sure the second bench top was clamped in place perfectly before attempting to cut it. And here we go, this is the first cut. You can see the saw is going to ride alongside the second bench top all the way to the end. Well, that didn't go to plan.
Well, it does work, it's just so hard and thick. I think it's just going to take a long time to get through it, and this blade's reasonably sharp. I think just, I don't know, yeah, just going to have to take it extremely slow. I think what I might do is try and find some wax and just wax up the bottom of this a little bit as well, so it's a bit easy to slide, but no, otherwise it's all good, just slow.
Well, I persevered with the cut, but I figured out the blade was actually just really blunt. In fact, it was pretty much cooking its way through the wood. In the end, the cut didn't turn out too bad, though it was a little rough. Luckily, these cut edges will be going against the wall, and I'll leave the factory cut side facing the user. But rather than struggling through for the rest of the cuts, I just got a new blade and it cut much cleaner. The next cuts, which were probably the hardest, were these diagonal cuts. I'm using the offcut of the bench top to mark the cut line on this bit of tape. Then I'm also using the same piece as the fence. I got the missus to jump in and hold the piece for me as it was pretty heavy. That all seemed to go good, so now we can carry the bench tops into the room. This was our first real look at what the office would look like when it was finished. Now remember, I'm using products designed for kitchens, which are traditionally a lot higher than a typical computer desk. Pretty high.
It's so high.
Well, I've only got one other option, and that is to cut every one of these flush to the bottom of the cabinets, but that drops it down quite a lot. I personally really like that, but it's up to you.
Well, that didn't work out too good. So there's about a 7mm gap there, and obviously tighten the corner there. So that's if we put it flush against the wall. So basically what I've done is somehow skewed my cut by quite a bit. So if I make a cut now from that point and come away 7mm from that point there, that should hopefully now slide in by about, like 5mm that way there. So I've got sort of one chance to correct my cut, but yeah, never mind, first time for everything. If I skew it, that turned out pretty nice there, but leaves us with a bit of a gap in the back, so yeah, try again. So a diagonal line, sort of getting slimmer right to the point, and that's going to correct the skew that I need to go. So now I've got to cut with the wider side of the track saw, of the saw, sorry. And that's 103mm back from there to the line.
Okay, so I've made the adjustment cut now, and it doesn't look too bad. Measure twice, cut once, guys.
I'll be able to snug up that gap pretty well with the joiners I've got. Squeeze that tight, and yeah, nice and flush against the wall. Probably push it in a bit more like that. Yeah. And yeah, looking pretty good.
Now we need a way to fix these bench tops together. I got these bench top joiners from Bunnings and a Forstner bit to suit. I'll show you how these work.
Okay, we're upside down, but it might be hard to see. I'm underneath and I've got it sort of clamped. That's about as tight as I can get the join for the minute. What I'm doing is drawing a straight line across here, and I've got to cut some holes out here like that, a very small channel, another hole, and I've got little joins that will pull and squeeze these bench tops together really tight. So I'm going to do one across there, and I'll probably do two more, and then Lastly, I can just use some L brackets sort of around the place and just bracket it onto, screw it onto the frames. Another option would be all these cross members, is just pre-drill a hole and pump some screws up into the desk, but I mean the weight of it alone, plus computer gear sitting on it, it's probably never going to move. It's really, really heavy. So yeah.
Okay, back on the top side, and you can see the lines that I made. I've flipped the bench top over, and now I'm measuring back to where I'll make the holes for the joiners. I'm using the Forstner bit to drill out a recess for the joiner. Now the idea is to not drill all the way through, so I'm being careful with the depth. Next I can measure and cut out a notch for the joiner to fit. Here's how they look when they're done. Now I just need to do the other side too. Cool, so these just get installed in the slot and holes we made between each bench top, and then tighten it up until it squeezes the gap together. Pretty smart way to keep the joinery hidden if you ask me. Let's have a look how it turned out.
Alright. Yeah, that's much better, much tighter.
Now we need to fix the drawer fronts onto the drawers. This was a bit of a difficult process and hard to film, but basically I just pre-drilled some holes into the drawers and then screwed from the inside into the fronts to fix things on. The hinge door on the centre cupboard was a bit of a struggle to get on, but all the holes for these were pre-drilled and there is plenty of adjustment in the hinges to get the door lined up nicely.
Well, that was a big struggle, getting all these hinges and stuff on. It's really, really hard to film in here, so just give you a quick overview, but there's 3 hinges on the inside and they're all sort of depth adjustable and how far they set off the brackets, and I played around quite a bit, and at the moment that's about the best I can get, so it's pretty much nice and flush the whole way around. The doors are level and they look good on the bottom, so now I'm just sort of deciding on where the handle's going to go, and I think I'm just going to centre it. Obviously it sits inside the door itself, but it's just going to centre in there so you'll be able to pull it out when you need it. And yeah, definitely needs a clean. It's very dusty from the cardboard. So I've just made my own sort of wood filler with some normal PVA wood glue and some of the sawdust from cutting these bench tops, so I'll see how that goes. Not sure how well it's going to work.
Sweet as. Now we just need to finish the bench tops. I'm going to give them a nice sand and then coat them with this monocell clear varnish. Before I can do that though, I need to make some big holes for cable glands. I think this hole is 79mm, which is a bit of an odd size. So the bit I'm using is actually for metal, which meant it took a little longer to drill through. Okay, on to sanding. Now this is pretty boring to watch, but basically I started with 120 grit and followed that up with 240 grit. The wood is fairly well surfaced from the factory already, but this made all the difference in feel. I took my time to make sure that it was as smooth as possible before I applied any of the varnish. It let me introduce a nice rounded edge on the top surface, which gets rid of the sharpness from the cutting. With the sanding out the way, I used some cardboard to mask around the desk. I'm planning on spraying this in place since it would be too cumbersome to break it down and carry out of the room. Again, this is pretty boring to watch, but I did 4 coats in total, gently sanding between each layer to knock down any high spots. It was pretty exciting to see the monocell start to take form and harden up. It really made the beautiful wood grain stand out. Some tips: if possible, don't spray indoors, but if you have to, some ventilation is a good idea. And don't forget to cover the floor with a tarp or drop cloth. You don't want varnish on the carpet.
Okay, so bench top's done. It's looking pretty good. Now the next step, I've only got one power point in this room, so I've got to make a way to get power from here through the cabinet and through all these into this main cabinet here. So I'm just going to use a 35mm hole saw bit and make some circular holes through like these top parts here, and then I'll be able to route cables and pin them to the underside of the desk, and if they've got to come up through the hole, they can. Not too bad. Stuff that one up.
So hopefully you can see how the cable will be routed. All of this is hidden from the front, by the way. I bought this multi-board with a long extension lead that is just long enough to route through the holes I made. I'm replacing the plug with this right angled one, and that means now I'll have a 6-socket power strip in the middle cabinet. I 3D printed these J-clip cable organisers, and these are screwed underneath the desk, which keeps the cables nice and tidy. Speaking of cables, I had to buy a couple of extensions, and I also made up a custom length network cable so that the desktop PC could be stashed away in the middle cupboard. Even though the monocell is quite a tough finish, I got some big mats to help protect the desktop. Now I can start adding everything in. Alright, just a reminder of what we started with, and now let's have a look how this all turned out. Well, I think you'd agree with me that it looks a whole lot better. So what's it like to use? I found having the PC stashed away in the center console is nice and quiet and leaves lots of space for working. The drawers are easy to get to and have lots of space in them too. I'm also stoked that I can stand up at this desk, which is a big winner in my books, and the reason I went for this height in the first place. The surface finish turned out great too, and it's really pleasing to touch. Overall, I think I've made a significant improvement in this room, not to mention added value to my home. Thanks so much for watching, hopefully you picked up something useful. Let me know what you thought of this build below, and don't forget,
make sure you subscribe and like to this channel.
See you guys next time.